Alright guys, so for today's video we're going to be talking about an article that came out in regards to a video that I saw about a month ago, which was about DC considering tossing out the social worker exam over concerns it fails too many people of color. And with that said, I'm going to be playing the news clip for you just so you can get a better understanding of what's going on.
Nurses, pharmacists, even barbers have to pass tests to work in D.C., but the D.C. Council is considering doing away with the exam requirement for certain types of social workers over concerns of racial bias.
Yeah, the move comes as the nation grapples with a shortage of social workers. Our investigative reporter Ted Oberg and the News 4 I-team have been digging into this debate. Ted, what's at stake here?
Yeah, hey, Jim and Unn. Social workers address the needs of our city's most vulnerable neighbors. And everyone we spoke with agrees it's important to make sure they are qualified to do that. But critics and now a D.C. council member say the test that's long been used to determine that readiness is holding too many people of color back from the communities that need the help the most. On Catholic University's campus.
And I want to hear from each group.
Graduate students like Sarah and Nestor are preparing for a career helping others.
You're going to be a social worker.
Sarah is from Southeast DC and wants to fill a gap she discovered when she was the one who needed help.
When I searched for therapists in DC, finding a black therapist as a woman who would see the same worldviews as me was almost nil to none.
The News 4 I-team sat down with the students, Sarah, Carla Abney, Emily Fortiz, and Raquel Ruiz, as DC contemplates changing what it takes to become a social worker. Only one of them, PhD candidate Carla, has taken the exam needed to become what's called a licensed graduate social worker.
It was one of the toughest things I've ever done.
She passed, but the I-team found there's growing concern that too few people who look like her are passing too.
What the exam is doing is de-diversifying the profession.
Catholic University professor Michael Massey says for years he's seen too many students of color succeed in class but fail the multiple choice licensure exam, which he says fails to capture cultural nuances.
And so we have great social workers of color who came to social work schools to serve their communities, and they're not being allowed to do it despite rigorous preparation at school.
Massey's among those who have pushed the Association of Social Work Boards, which for decades has administered the exam to release pass rate data, and the results were stark. Between 2018 and 2021, 76% of white test takers passed the bachelor's level exam the first time, but only 60% of Asian test takers did, followed by 53% of Hispanic applicants and only 33% of black test takers passed that first time.
It's easy to say, like, you could possibly blame the test takers, but I think accountability has to be taken of how the exam is structured.
Now Councilman Robert White is behind a bill that would eliminate the exam for entry and master's level licensure applicants whose work would still have to be supervised by more experienced social workers.
We will not sort of release unqualified people onto the masses. But this exam is not a proven method of qualification.
After Illinois eliminated their test 2 years ago, that state saw nearly 3,000 social workers licensed the following year. White says he hopes doing so here will help fill widespread vacancies in schools and social services. Why not fix the exam?
There is no evidence that this exam, passing this exam, results in better practitioners.
Anna Glow Boone, executive director of the Consortium for Child Welfare and head of the Social Workers Unite DC Coalition, says more research is needed before tossing out this exam. She notes 85% of DC graduate applicants eventually pass it.
The exam, the social work exam, is not the problem.
Boone says DC could allow social workers to work with a provisional license while they take the test again. And she says city leaders should focus on retaining current social workers instead of weakening the requirements to become one.
We won't know if these folk who get licensed without passing or demonstrating basic competencies, if they will engage in safe, competent, ethical, responsible practice.
I mean, if someone shows that they're a risk to a patient, we can get rid of them.
Maybe, but we won't know that until after the fact.
In a statement, the Social Work Board told News 4 they stand by our social work licensing examinations and believe DC should keep them because doing so brings legitimacy to our profession. The board adds they are currently researching ways to address the larger institutional inequities.
I really have to prepare to understand this exam that really wasn't created for someone who looks like me.
Back at Catholic, some of these students worry that unless the test changes or DC does away with it, they may not be able to do the work they've set out to do.
Having that kind of on my back a little bit is nerve-wracking.
Earlier this year, Maryland created a work group to study this issue there, and Carla, who you just saw in our report, is serving as the chair of that working group. Here in D.C., it's important to note Councilmember White's proposal wouldn't affect the highest level of social workers who can diagnose and treat mental and behavioral disorders. But his proposal does set up a study to possibly eliminate their test as well. There is no schedule for a council vote on this issue.
So there you hear 3/4 of white people pass, 60% of Asians pass, a little over 50% of Hispanics pass, yet black people only account for 1/3 of the pass rate. Now, I don't know what kind of questions that there would be that are de-diversifying this field of social work. What cultural nuances, as this gentleman stated, are being perpetuated in these questions that black people can't understand? To me, if you're studying the material that the course is laying out, then you will be prepared for the test and the exam. And as that girl stated, yes, you could blame the test taker. Well, I think that that's probably a good place to start. I don't see why that idea is so far-fetched. However, instead of maybe working on how to maybe get the third up, as the gentleman said, maybe working on the test, they think it's a smart idea just to remove the test altogether. Yet he also states that people who aren't qualified won't get pushed forward. Well, how do you know if they're qualified or not if you're removing the test that shows that they're qualified? That is the point of the licensing exam. I know my nurse friends, my doctor friends, anybody who works with the public, is in a medical field, in any profession, there's a licensing exam that needs to be done to prove that you have competency in that field of work. Simply because a certain demographic is not passing does not mean that you remove that as a standard. And this isn't the first time we've seen this. As we've talked about many times on this channel, math class, they're removing certain grades, certain tests, because they're saying that people of color aren't passing, that it's some sort of white supremacy. Even Bill Gates and his foundation supported this, saying that they're trying to remove racism from math class.
For today's culture warriors, pretty much everything is racist these days, even mathematics. Yes, mathematics. Dismantling Racism in Mathematics is an education program that tells American teachers not to push students to find the correct answers to maths problems because doing so promotes white supremacy. Grading students, asking them to show their work, requiring participation, even pushing them to get the right answer are all depicted as harmful to minorities. Who would have thought it? The program hails from California, naturally. It's funded by a $1 million grant from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Sometimes you wonder if they've got more money than sense. Critics say the approach just reinforces negative stereotypes. It drives wedges between students according to their race. Why assume black kids are naturally bad at maths? There's no evidence for that. Actually, it's a pretty racist assumption to make in the first place. The concept of mathematics being purely objective is unequivocally false, says the manual. Unequivocally. If I could pronounce it, it'd be even more effective. Unequivocally false. The manual goes on to then say that upholding the idea that there are always right and wrong answers perpetuates objectivity.
And here's that article talking about that clip you just saw. Math suffers from white supremacy according to the Bill Gates Foundation course. It states on the website, white supremacy culture shows up in math classrooms when the focus is on getting the right answer. Math is objective. 1 + 1 is 2. 2 + 2 is 4. There's no way around that. You could have aliens from another planet show up here, and that would still be fact. But later on in the article, it states the equitable math method of teaching consists of 5 strides. The first stride, dismantling racism in mathematics, which is bonkers to think that racism exists in math. It's just not the case. And even if you were to believe any of this, I wonder if Bill Gates was still running Microsoft, if he would hire any of these individuals who seems to think that math is not objective and have them program Microsoft or make programs for him. How fast would he fire that person and send them out of them because their coding is incorrect? They put 1 plus 1 is 9, and now all of a sudden the systems are all out of whack. Do you think Bill Gates is hiring these people that believe that? Or his company or anything like that? Highly doubt it. But it doesn't stop there. We've seen this with English, where English is racist and white supremacy simply because you correct somebody.
Saw this in my time in the public school system. When a Black or African American child says to their teacher, "Teacher, can I ask you a question?" And the immediate response being from the teacher with a sense of superiority based in white racial superiority, often with our 84% white female teachers, the response being, "That's not how we say ask. We say ask. Ask isn't a word."
Now, I personally never said ax instead of ask. I've always said ask. But I was always corrected when I'd say, "Can I go to the bathroom?" And they would say, "Well, can you?" And then you say, "Oh, may I go to the bathroom?" This is standard. It's normal to correct somebody when they say something improper in the English language. But apparently, that's too much for people. And now, right after this article came out, as of a few weeks ago, this one, Oregon again says students don't need to prove mastery of reading, writing, or math to graduate, citing harm to students of color. And it goes on to say, Oregon high school students won't have to prove basic mastery of reading, writing, or math to graduate from high school until at least 2029. And this program has been going on since 2020. That's almost a whole decade of stupid kids getting pushed through because they don't have to pass anything. Yet down here they try to defend themselves by saying board members underscored that state mandated standardized tests will still be administered to most Oregon high school students. They just won't be used to determine whether a student has the skills necessary to graduate. We haven't suspended any sort of assessment. The only thing we are suspending is the inappropriate use of how these assessments were being used. I think that really is in the best interest of the Oregon students. So you're making them still take the mandatory test, but then not taking the results of the test to prove whether these people are capable of getting into the real world and using their skills to get a job or proceed throughout life. How dumb is that? And even the students apparently went against this, saying opponents argued that pausing the requirements devalues an Oregon diploma, giving students with low academic skills extra instruction in writing and math, which most high schools did in response to the graduation rules, helped them. But they state higher rates of students of color, students learning English as a secondary language, and students with disability end up having to take intensive senior year writing and math classes to prove they deserved a diploma. Now, you can't tell me that nobody else is taking these writing and math classes to prove that they deserve the diploma. But to ball up students of color with people who have English as a secondary language and disabled people is a huge insult, in my opinion, to students of color, which leads me to the soft bigotry of low expectations. I just don't understand how you could push to have social workers not pass the exam or not have to take an exam, even though the lady at the end of that video said people who take it a second time have like an 80% higher chance of passing it. But we've had multiple articles talking about having social workers work with police. Here in Canada, for example, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau told the House of Commons this week that mental health supporters need to be stepped up so police are not sole providers for such outreach in many situations. Another story here in Canada talking about replacing police as first responders to non-emergency issues with crisis workers, aka like support workers. And there's other articles from the States that are talking about this piggyback method where they'll have a police and a social worker working together. If I was an officer, why would I want somebody who didn't pass an exam with me, who's not qualified? And as a social worker who's not qualified, why would I want to be going out there? It just doesn't make any sense. Let me know what you guys think about this one in the comment section below. As always, I will catch you guys on the next one. Thanks so much.